Although Maldraxxus is the second zone in leveling order, it was the fourth zone to recently be revealed on the Shadowlands Alpha, and fell in line with the great immersion of the other three zones we've already seen. Unsurprisingly, the hard metal Necrolord Covenant has its home located here, and seeing as I share the same term mauled with the zone, this seems like a match made in heaven to check out the Necrolord Covenant abilities. Follow my Twitch, you animals! Even though these Covenant abilities have been available in rotation in Torghast for a bit now, it was still nice to see the short questline that unlocks your Covenant class ability. It really helps me come to terms with the idea of a corrupt Necrolord Paladin that is usually a wielder of the light. It makes about as much sense as bringing a Windwalker to raid over literally any other melee. We need to take a look at the general Covenant ability from Necrolords before diving into the class stuff. Comparing someone who has the Venthyr ability Door of Shadows to Necrolord's Fleshcraft is like comparing someone who got Lego to another that got Alliance socks with holes in them for Christmas. Fleshcraft is a 2-minute cooldown and 2-minute duration for a 20% max HP shield that can be bolstered up to 50% of max HP. The absorb value isn't horrible, but the issue comes with a fairly long cooldown compared to Night Fae and Venthyr, and the fact that you need to sit and channel a pretty lengthy 4-second cast just to get the max absorption on the shield. The ability has potential and will have some obvious uses, but it's just not as exciting as some of the other options. Except the Kyrian Swolkins. Nightmare fuel those things are. Please don't turn these into this expansion's turtle meme. Classes! Let's talk about classes. Abomination Limb is yet another solid Covenant ability in the Death Knight arsenal and reminds me of my nickname in university. Every 2 minutes you grow an extra limb that lasts 12 seconds and pulses moderate AoE damage every 2 seconds. With this pulse, you also death grip an enemy that is further than 8 yards from you. Now this all sounds nice and dandy, but in fact isn't that handy. Not only do you lack control over what you grab, similar to Preach when surrounded by pints of beer, but the ability will grip mobs that are crowd controlled or even out of combat, so you need to make sure that you're well clear of anything when using it. Otherwise it has some great uses like chain interrupting a target cast, rounding up scattered mobs, or even preventing mobs from fleeing in terror. Warrior's ability Conqueror's Banner is so good, it's dumb. Okay, I guess I should probably describe what the warrior ability actually does. With the 2-minute cooldown, you place a banner on your back for 2 minutes, gaining stacks of glory, which you gain 2 of from kills and 1 from using iconic spec abilities, which are Shield Slam, Mortal Strike, and Raging Blow. You can have up to 15 stacks of glory. When you're ready, you can reactivate the ability and either use the glory for a hole in the wall, or throw the banner down, which has a 15-yard radius and lasts 2 seconds per glory stack, up to a maximum of 30 seconds. You and 4 allies within the radius get 20% max HP and 50% increased attack speed for that duration. Let's be fair and call out some limitations though. Mobility can be an issue if you need to move from that area, and on top of that, the buff affecting only 5 players lowers its value in raids a bit, but it's still quite good. Wasn't this supposed to be a DK themed expansion? Could have fooled me with how many good Covenant abilities warriors are knocking out of the park. Well, I guess I lost $5 because it is possible to have a good rogue Covenant ability after all. Serrated Bone Spike is a 3-charge 30-second cooldown that hits a target for low damage, puts a permanent bleed on them until death, and generates a combo point. If the target dies or is healed to full with the bleed on them, the stack is then refunded. The icing on the cake is that every active debuff already out increases the initial hit damage of subsequent spikes by a moderate amount and generates an extra combo point. So if you have 2 debuffs out already, your next spike will initially hit for triple damage and generate 3 combo points. So you want to be firing these off faster than DMCAs on streamers. This ability is quite neat since it's already fairly strong for single target, though it doesn't stack, but has scaling benefits for multi-target with a bit of strategic play. Might also be worth noting that Exsanguinate may further boost the prowess of Serrated Bone Spike. Definitely worth a consideration. After writing a ton of jokes about Shadow Priest and Priest Covenant abilities, I was surprised when we got slammed with the great ability Unholy Nova. Don't let the name fool you though, it isn't for unholy DK since you don't need to prime 10 global cooldowns in order to use it. A short 1-minute cooldown hits all allies and enemies within 15 yards, healing allies for a moderate amount and putting a moderate to heavy dot on all enemies known as Unholy Transfusion. This acts like a Judgment of Light on crack that heals anyone who damages it for a small amount, but has no internal cooldown and no charges, so the faster you attack, the more you heal, and to make it even better, if you are cleaving a few mobs that all have been debuffed, you heal from all of them. This will go great with something like I-Beam from Havoc Demon Hunters who just don't have enough self-sustain as is. To make it even crazier for Disc Priest, the damage from the dot works with Atonement healing, so you can just AFK and grab a drink. I'm always a big fan of support and utility, and this ability has got the goods. Maybe if we keep throwing good Covenant abilities at Priest, people will just forget about Shadow and we can sweep them under the rug, where they belong. And the rich get richer. Decimating Bolt for Warlocks might lack a general AoE component, but packs a punch on a short 45-second cooldown and has a slight execute scaling. The ability hits for moderate shadow damage and increases the damage of your next 3 incinerates, drain souls, or shadow bolts by 200%. As mentioned, the damage of Decimating Bolt and the bonus damage to your ability is increased in proportion to the amount of health missing from the target. Because the resulting bolt is a buff on you and not an enemy debuff, you can likely take further advantage of the damage boost by getting a bit of bolstered cleave with Havoc on a Destro Warlock, or even turning your attention to another mob that needs some quick burst damage. Overall, a decent ability with a low cooldown, but frankly, it doesn't matter what Covenant you choose anyways. You and your closest 9 Warlock friends will always be brought to raid no matter what. Bonedust Brew for Monks is a short 1-minute cooldown that coats all enemies and allies within its large reticle in a thick white sticky goo. This adds a 10-second debuff or buff depending on foe or friend, which gives you a 15% chance to damage or heal your targets a second time for 25% shadow efficacy, almost like a mini multi-strike effect from that one expansion no one remembers. To sweeten the deal more, you get a spec-based benefit when damaging or healing a target with the effect on them. Brewmasters have Tiger Palm and Keg Smash reduce brews by an extra second, Mistweavers get a bonus to their Gust of Mist heal, and Windwalkers get to stay relevant in the game, and also get 1 chi refunded for their Spinning Crane Kick. The only downside to this ability is obviously the RNG associated with getting the extra damage and healing procs, but let's just hang tight. This is the first time they've ever experimented with RNG procs affecting throughput. The results have a 15% chance to be positive. Druids have a pretty nice ability from Necrolords known as Adaptive Swarm, not to be mistaken with Insect Swarms from Diablo 2 though. This is a short 25-second cooldown which puts up a 3-stack dot or hot depending on the target type for 12 seconds. During this time they are damaged or healed for a moderate amount and increase all of your periodic effects on them by 20%. Once the 12 seconds expires, the swarm will travel to a nearby enemy if it was on an ally and vice versa, lose a stack, and start a fresh 12-second timer. So if you're practiced at spreading diseases, this ability will be a doozy for you. This means that one cast lasts a total of 36 seconds, and it only has a 25-second cooldown, so yes, you will have a net positive amount of stacks going around and can keep 2 targets debuffed simultaneously for a short period, or you can choose to keep casting on the same target with your active stacks to keep adding a net +1 to the stack size. You get a bit of control with the spell for at least the initial application, but afterwards if there are many targets it can choose from, it can go on any one of them. Furthermore, it seems to always have to alternate friend and foe. You can't have the stack bounce to an enemy directly from another enemy. Another irritating limitation is that its bounce distance is very small, and it's possible to lose a stack prematurely if there are no other viable targets. This is as good as you're going to get, Feral Druids, so just take it and be happy. What better way to prove you're still an alpha, as it understandably frequently comes into question as a WoW player, than challenging a random demon in a duel to the death? Fodder to the Flame for Demon Hunters is a 2-minute cooldown which summons a random demon a few yards from you, ranging from things like Urzuls, Felguards, and even your mum.
She's a saint!
After you kill the demon, which drops a greater soul boosting your damage by 20% for 15 seconds, you are rewarded with a puddle of snot for 30 seconds that boosts your attack speed by 20% and reduces damage taken by 10% while standing in it. This is a pretty neat thematic ability, but may get a bit annoying if mobility demands are high, as the circle is quite small. Perhaps the greatest aspect is that you summon an extra target that you'll be able to pad on, truly the most important consideration. Well, color me surprised, a Shaman Covenant ability that doesn't do some damage and some healing? In fact, this time you only get to choose one of the two? What a deal! Primordial Wave has a modest 45-second cooldown which either hits for light to moderate damage and applies a flame shock to the target, or you can use it as a heal instead that applies Riptide to your target if you're resto. The secondary effect of the ability depends on if you're a DPS or a healer. Your next Lightning Bolt for Enhancement and Lava Burst for Elemental will hit all targets affected by Flame Shock, while your next Healing Wave will hit all targets affected by Riptide for Resto. What better way to encourage cross-roll play than by not making the second benefit of Primordial Wave even count for your off-roll? A nice small burst of AoE and a free Flame Shock is nice, but the overall scope and diversity of the ability is quite limited. Also, as with some of the other Shaman Covenant choice abilities, having a cast time on the ability for enhancement is irritating and ruins the flow of your otherwise spam-happy play. You don't always have the luxury of waiting for the ideal amount of Maelstrom stacks to get your instant cast, so they should consider just making this cast instant for them. I don't care what everyone says, enhancement players deserve love too. What can I say about Death Chakram for Hunters that hasn't already been said about me in bed? It's quick, dirty, lacks control, and is completely greedy with no help for others. Sitting at a short 45-second cooldown, you throw Chakram at your current target, which can either hit up to 7 times, or will bounce to other nearby targets for a total of 7 times. Note that this is purely a single target ability, and it does not splash or cleave, even if it hits another target. This helps spike damage on small target numbers or spreads out a bit of damage over larger groups. As mentioned though, you can't control what it damages in the group outside of the initial target. However, as a further benefit, each bounce increases in damage by 15% and every bounce generates 3 focus for a total of 21. For the few remaining Hunter players that haven't been put in jail yet for their class choice, this is a decent single target option with no RNG unlike their Venthyr ability. Deathborn is the next installment in the Bloodborne franchise, which has been announced for the Super Nintendo. Coincidentally, it also shares the same name as the Mage Necrolord Covenant ability. This ability is a lengthy 3-minute cooldown that for 20 seconds transforms you into a large skeletal mage so you can BDSM cosplay as an oversized unholy pet with your favorite DK player. During this time, your iconic spam abilities Frostbolt, Fireball, and Arcane Blast cleave up to 2 extra targets and all of your spell damage is increased by 10%. I know what you're thinking, and no, you didn't seem to be able to build multiple icicles per cast or proc hot streak faster, it was just a good old cleave, which also broke CC. This certainly feels like a solid effect when used, but a 3-minute cooldown is a bit long for the effect, especially considering some other Covenant effects with lower cooldowns. Wow, well I guess many Necrolord abilities actually turned out at least somewhat decent, until we got to the final class. I wish I had more hands so I could give Vanquisher's Hammer for Paladins 4 thumbs down. The ability has a short 30-second cooldown that tickles one target with a small amount of shadow damage. Then your next single target Holy Power spender within the next 15 seconds will also trigger your AoE spender. These are Word of Glory gives a free Shield of the Righteous for Prot, Templar's Verdict gives a free Divine Storm for Red, and finally Word of Glory again gives a free Light of Dawn for Holy. This effect is quite minimal and just adds a bit of throughput to a situation that likely isn't benefiting much from the proc. For instance, if you're AoEing as Ret, which will only be against target dummies since you can't get into any groups, chances are you want to be dumping all of your Holy Power into Divine Storm anyways, so all this does is give you a free Templar's Verdict every 30 seconds, which isn't much in the grand scheme of things. Furthermore, since it's a one-time small effect, it doesn't help keep up with sustained AoE requirements. Prot probably gets the best deal out of all this as they get a free Shield of the Righteous, but even then, with their beneficial resource budget changes in Shadowlands, you won't often need that extra Shield of the Righteous. It'll be like a small bonus no one asked for. Sure, the ability has its small benefits and may even see a bit of synergy with Divine Purpose, but the relative weakness is all the more apparent when you compare it to some of the other Covenant abilities and see what those bring, like Kyrian and Night Fae. Overall, the ability isn't too exciting and starts to feel like a 30-second button tax which doesn't provide much fun or anything game-changing, just like real taxes. Well, that was quite the class ability preview. Strangely enough, both priests and rogues got good options in this Covenant. Guess that cost us a raid tier and probably some dungeons as well, for the next 3 expansions. For those of you metal and alpha enough to find your home in Maldraxxus with the Necrolords, I hope it was everything you wanted and compensated for. Remember to wear your Iron Maiden shirt that has been washed a total of 6 times since 1980 in order to get a 2% reputation buff with the Covenant. As usual, if you have any questions, everyone is always welcome to hang out in my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/sloot. I stream entirely too much, but won't admit I have an addiction. And I almost forget, make sure you follow and subscribe here to keep up to date with all of the new info and thoughts, or you'll be cursed with no class changes for yet another expansion.